Hey, this is Lauren with 10,000 Books and More. Thank you for joining me today. As promised in my previous podcast, I will be reviewing creative nonfiction today. But before we begin, I would like to apologize in advance for background noises. My cats are very frisky today. I also want to let you know that I normally have an author scheduled for an interview each month, but this month our author had a situation come up, so we are going to be rescheduling. I will be replacing that interview with a different interview, hopefully either the end of this month or the start of next month. I have a guest that is a singer-songwriter. So before we begin, I would like to state that 10,000 Books and More is an Owl and Dragonfly production in association with A Bookish Kind of Art. My first review today is a book called Torture Mom, A Chilling True Story of Confinement, Mutilation, and Murder. This is by Ryan Green. The publisher is Ryan Green Publishing, and it was published June 25th, 2018. This is a true crime book, and it is 174 ebook pages. So this book comes with a trigger warning. This book does depict explicit details, very graphic details, of the abuses and murder of a young teenage girl. This is not a book for young children or for those who are unaccustomed to gruesome details of crime, torture, and abuse. So the book blurb states, in July 1965, teenagers Sylvia and Jenny Likens were left in the temporary care of Gertrude Baniszewski, a middle-aged single mother and her 7 children. The Baniszewski household was overrun with children. There were few rules and ample freedom. Sadly, the environment created a dangerous hierarchy of social Darwinism where the strong preyed on the weak. What transpired in the following 3 months was both riveting and chilling. In October of 1965, the body of Sylvia Likens was found in the basement of the Baniszewski home where she had been imprisoned. She was starved, beaten, burned, and had the words, "I am a prostitute and proud of it," carved into her stomach. Gertrude Baniszewski oversaw and facilitated the torture and eventual murder of Sylvia Likens. While she played an active role in Sylvia's death, the majority of the abuse was carried out by her children and other neighborhood youths. The case shocked the entire nation and would later be described as the single worst crime perpetrated against an individual in Indiana's history. So this book promises to tell us all about the murder of a young girl and the torture and abuses that she suffered at the hands of a very cruel woman, her own children, and a few of the neighborhood children. It also tells us how this child came to be in the care of this woman and the aftermath of this crime. Ryan Green is a true crime writer. He's from England and is fascinated with history and psychology as well as true crime. He has researched and written numerous books on the true crime genre, mostly murders, and generally tends to present things from the criminal's perspective. He does not hold back on the details. So the tone of his book is very sad, very serious, and he presents a very interesting perspective on the murder of Sylvia Likens, showing all sides of the story, not just one. And he doesn't seem to pass any judgment. He just presents us with the facts and a little bit of speculation. His introduction is from the perspective of Sylvia's younger sister Jenny, painting what must have gone through her mind in between the time when her sister died and the time the police arrived. From there, everything just basically happens chronologically in the main portion of the book, and it begins with Gertrude's background and upbringing, her failed marriages and such. He paints a very bleak picture of the woman who comes to be known as the torture mom. Now, what I did like about this book was how well the author presents the tragic story of Sylvia and what she suffered. And even though the facts are horrific, there is still an undercurrent of respect in this book rather than exploitation. This crime did happen back in 1965, and it was a well-known crime in its time, but has largely been forgotten. The author gives us an honest presentation of both Ms. Baniszewski, her children, and of Sylvia herself along with her sister. He doesn't paint Sylvia as a perfect child, but she's a typical teenager. She's excited to be out and she wants to be with friends. She wants to do things. and she's not necessarily bucking authority, but as a typical teenager, she does question it at times. He also doesn't paint Gertrude as a complete villain with no redeeming qualities. He gives you a good in-depth background to explain maybe why some of what went through her head. It in no way excuses her, and he does not offer it as an excuse, more as an example of what may have led her to do what she did. They're both very human, and they found themselves in a terrible circumstance that just spiraled out of control. Sadly for Gertrude, she was in denial of her crimes and her part of Sylvia's death until she died. What I didn't like about the book was how intense and graphic some of the sections are when it came to the torture and the abuses suffered by Sylvia. I'm not squeamish, but these were real events happening to a child, and it was very hard to read and not be enraged, horrified, sad, and at times feeling quite helpless to do anything, since obviously it's far too late to help Miss Sylvia now. Growing up with an abusive mother and stepfather and being bullied in school, I could truly empathize with Sylvia. I can only remind myself how lucky I am that what I went through was nothing like what Sylvia Likens did in such a short time. Now, there are no photographs in the book, for which I'm actually grateful. I feel like if he had included them, it would have made the book feel more exploitative rather than respectful feel that it has. The author is writing for those who enjoy true crime novels and possibly for those who are interested in crime history. This is not a book for children or general audiences. This book has a lot of feels, mostly negative. I cried after reading several passages. I even had to put the book down at times and walk away because how awful these events were. I did like this book, however, and I feel it's important that Sylvia's story is told, if only to make us aware of how depraved humans can become and to guard ourselves and others against those depravities. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars only because it's so gruesome and detailed that I could feel my skin crawling at times. If you are interested in reading Torture Mom, you can find it at Amazon for $3.99 for the ebook. It is free to borrow through the Kindle Unlimited program. It is $11.99 for paperback, $19.99 for hardcover, and $9.09 at Audible. It is also selling at Barnes & Noble for $11.99 in paperback. So my next book is The Radium Girls, The Dark Side of America's Shining Women by Kate Moore. This is published by Sourcebooks. The first edition was published on April 18, 2017. Its genre is medical history, women's history, and it is 476 ebook pages. So again, this book comes with a trigger warning. This book details the effects of radium poisoning in detail. The deaths of these women and the crimes against humanity committed by large corporations. So the book blurb reads, in the dark years of the First World War, radium makes gleaming headlines across the nation as the fresh face of beauty and wonder drug of the medical community. From body lotion to tonic water, the popular new element shines bright. Meanwhile, hundreds of girls toil amidst the glowing dust of the radium dial factories. The glittering chemical covers their bodies from head to toe. They light up the night like industrious fireflies. With such a coveted job, these shining girls are the luckiest alive until they begin to fall mysteriously ill, and until they begin to come forward. As the women start to speak out on the corruption, the factories that once offered golden opportunities ignore all claims of gruesome side effects. And as the fatal poison of the radium takes hold, the brave shining girls find themselves embroiled in one of the biggest scandals of America in the early 20th century, and in the groundbreaking battle for workers' rights that will echo for centuries to come. A timely story of corporate greed and the brave figures that stood up to fight for their lives, these women and their voices will shine for years to come. Written with a sparkling voice and breakneck pace, The Radium Girls fully illuminates the inspiring young women exposed to the wonder substance of radium and their awe-inspiring strength in the face of the almost impossible circumstances. Their courage and tenacity led to life-changing regulations, research into nuclear bombing, and ultimately saved hundreds and thousands of lives. So basically, Moore tells us about the lives and deaths of these women who were known as the Radium Girls and their struggle to change workers' rights laws in the early 20th century, as well as the injustices they faced. This book promises to tell us about the lives of the girls and women who were employed at two separate companies that sold radium-painted products to the military and public, their illnesses from radium poisoning, and their long fight to gain protections from hazardous materials, as well as the lies told by their employers about the benefits of radium to themselves and the public. These corporations knew that radium was toxic, and they chose to protect the men in the labs, but they ignored the safety of the women who painted with this toxic substance. The book does tell all of this and more. So Kate Moore studied English literature at the University of Warwick and then went on to have a career in publishing as a nonfiction editor. Over time, she rose to be the editorial director of Penguin Random House in UK. She left her job to become a freelance editor, author, and ghostwriter. And according to her website, her purpose as a writer is to help people to have a voice, especially those silenced through injustice. Now, unfortunately, I do have a very unpopular opinion about this book, so you are being forewarned. While it is very well researched and certainly heart-wrenching to read, it felt more like a gossip rag than a proper nonfiction book about a very tragic subject. The tone of this book is very emotional and quite melodramatic. What I did like about this book was that it was historically accurate, well researched, and it made an honest attempt to show you the lives of these women before and after they were poisoned by radium. She does fulfill her promise in telling us what happened to these women, the companies, and the laws that were changed. I felt a lot of empathy for these women and their families, and I cheered for them when their sufferings were finally acknowledged by the law. And I was very disappointed in these companies that exploited these women and refused to help them until they were forced to do so. I also hated these companies for telling people these girls were dying from sexually transmitted diseases, specifically syphilis, rather than admitted that they had poisoned and killed these girls. What I didn't like about the book were the endless insipid descriptions of these girls. Every time someone new was introduced, we're constantly told how pretty these girls are, as if being pretty was their only quality, or that being pretty somehow makes their stories more tragic. There's just too much unnecessary information in describing what everyone looks like. The writing style to me felt very melodramatic and shallow, and rather than just giving us the facts, it's overly seasoned with speculations on what people were thinking, and it hops around in timelines and locations, with many of the chapters ending in cliffhangers. I found a lot of this confusing, but this is just me. I find I prefer my information to be chronologically linear and without all of the dramatic effects. It is a worthy topic that I felt wasn't given quite just enough respect of the subject just for the sake of drama. The other thing I didn't like was how very gory details are shared, describing how radium poisoning affected the girls, even if using some rather odd ways of describing them. And then suddenly in the book, the word vagina is suddenly not fit to print, but is referred to as, quotes, down there. I found that just kind of an odd, jarring thing that you can mention a girl's jawbone is disintegrating in her face, falling out when a doctor touches it, but you can't mention she's got vaginal bleeding because apparently the V word is taboo in this book. There are photographs in the book showing some of the girls in happier times and some when they were feeling the full effects of the poisoning. These images the reader will see just kind of shows you how real these women were, that they were living, breathing entities, and how vibrant their young lives were before they were snuffed out by greed and ignorance. The audience for this book is the general public, giving voices to these victims and sharing their stories so they are not forgotten over time. This is not a book for children, however, due to its graphic nature. I did see the movie. I enjoyed the movie, and I had very high expectations for this book. I enjoyed it at first, but after time it started wearing on me emotionally until I just started to just make me angry with the writing style as much as the circumstances that these women were suffering through. The book left me with feeling angry, partly because of the writing style, but mostly because of how these women were treated by these large corporations. I ended up giving this book 2.5 stars. If you're interested in reading The Radium Girls, you can find it at Amazon for $9.17 for the ebook, $15.29 for the paperback, $32.99 for the hardcover and $26.33 at Audible. It is also selling at Barnes & Noble for $9.99 for ebook, $16.99 for paperback, $32.99 for large print, or free for the audiobook at the Barnes & Noble app. My third book today is The Executioner's Song by Norman Mailer. The book I read was published by Grand Central Publishing, and it was the reprinted edition printed on May 8th of 2012. The original book was published in 1979. This genre is true crime, and it is 1,074 ebook pages. So trigger warning, this book depicts acts of adult nature, as well as violence and murder. So the book blurb. Arguably the greatest book from America's most heroic and ambitious writer, The Executioner's Song follows the short, blighted life of Gary Gilmore, who became famous after he robbed two men in 1976 and killed them in cold blood. After being tried and convicted, he immediately insisted on being executed for his crime. To do so, he fought a system that seemed intent on keeping him alive long after it had sentenced him to death. And that fight for the right to die is what made him famous. Mailer tells not only Gilmore's story, but those of the men and women caught in the web of his life and drawn to his procession toward the firing squad, all with implacable authority, steely compassion, and a restraint that evokes the parched landscape and stern theology of Gilmore's Utah. The Executioner's Song is a trip down the wrong side of the tracks to the deepest source of American loneliness and violence. It is a towering achievement, impossible put down, impossible forget. So this book promises to tell us about the life and crimes of Gary Gilmore in detail. This book does indeed give us a history and attempts to paint Gary Gilmore in a kinder light than the media. I didn't feel that Gary Gilmore was redeemable, however. So in that one part, the author failed, at least with me. For those who don't know who Gary Gilmore is, he killed two people. The first was on the night of July 19th, 1976, and the second was the night after. Both were working men with wives and children, but little more is mentioned about them in the book. When Gary was convicted and given the death penalty, he fought with the justice system to stop giving him appeals and stays. He wanted to die, in fact tried to commit suicide twice before being executed. And his method of execution, he chose to be executed by firing squad rather than being hanged by the neck until dead. Nachum Malek Mailer, known by his pen name Norman Kingsley Mailer, was an American novelist, journalist, playwright, and filmmaker. Mailer is considered an innovator of creative nonfiction or new journalism, along with Truman Capote, Joan Didion, Hunter S. Thomas, and Tom Wolfe. In 1960, Mailer was convicted of assault and served a 3-year probation after he stabbed his wife, Adele Morales, with a penknife, nearly killing her. He has won the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction as well as the National Book Award for several books, and including a Pulitzer for The Executioner's Song. The tone of his writing is very casual and almost laid back. He uses a lot of the language and slang at the time, which has not really aged well, and it felt a bit too casual for me considering the topic. I felt that this was an inappropriate tone, but I can't really say what the right tone should have been. This book does feel rather exploitative, and coming out within 2 years of The Executioner's Song and Mailer's own run-ins with the law. I think he truly meant for the readers to feel sympathy for Gary and his difficult life, but I really couldn't find anything at all to like about Gary Gilmore. Now, what I did like about this book was how easy it was to read in spite of being such a long book. He used very simple language, and everything remained in chronological order and didn't jump around, and we were presented with very few melodramatic situations. We're also given the perspective of the people in Gary Gilmore's life, especially his cousin and his girlfriend at the time he committed the murders. With the dialogue and wording, we get a glimpse of the 1970s, how life was like for common and poorer folk at the time, and how much has changed since then. It is divided into 3 parts, the first part telling about Gary's childhood and beyond. He whines, he's petulant, always looking for beer and sex, and wants everything now, refuses to work for it. He lies, he steals, gets into fights over petty things, and has a macho ego that was very common in the 70s that's rather laughable these days. He is intelligent, but he has the maturity of a 15-year-old sometimes and a 3-year-old at other times. He's very angry a lot, refuses to work a proper job or even try to make an honest living. However, he's also a very skilled artist. and a man who took two innocent lives of people who did as they told him. He said, "Give me the money." They gave him the money. He killed them anyway. The second part of the book is basically all about his trial and his fight for his rights to die. And the third part is mainly the pictures and the afterward photos of Gary, the people in his life. There are no pictures of his victims. And then it gives basically explanation of Norman Mailer. What I didn't like about this book, even though it was really easy to read, was how long it was and how detailed. There were far too many details that could have been left out or written better. And even though the book was easy to read, it felt like it just dragged on and on and on. I honestly got very bored reading the book because it was so long and I nearly gave up on it. Rather than summarizing, this and this and this and this month, we hear detail from day to day to day. He got up, he had a beer, he peed outside, he went to the convenience store and stole some beer, went back home and tumbled his girlfriend and drank some more beer. Norman likes to tell us all of that. There are photographs, as I said, in the book. Again, only of Gary Gilmore himself, his girlfriend, some of his family, and of his trial. The author, I feel, is writing for those who enjoy true crime novels and possibly for those who are interested in crime history. And again, this is not a book for children or general audiences. This book had me excited at first and then bored to tears. I felt little to nothing for Gary or his girlfriend, a little sympathy for his family and the people around him. I felt angry for the victims' families and heartbroken for his victims. I gave this one a rating of 3 out of 5 stars, and I don't really recommend it too highly. However, if you are interested in reading The Executioner Song, you can find it at Amazon for $12.99 for the ebook, $14.99 for the paperback, $17.74 for hardcover, and $12.99 at Audible. It is also selling at Barnes & Noble for $12.99 for the ebook, $24.99 for the paperback, or free for the audiobook in the Barnes & Noble app. My final review is The Soul of an Octopus, A Surprising Exploration into the Wonder of Consciousness by Cy Montgomery. Publisher is Atria Books. I read the reprinted edition that was published May 12, 2015. This genre is creative nonfiction, science, marine biology. There are 273 ebook pages. The blurb. In pursuit of the wild, solitary, predatory octopus, popular naturalist Cy Montgomery has practiced true immersion journalism. From New England aquarium tanks to the reefs of French Polynesia and the Gulf of Mexico, she has befriended octopuses with strikingly different personalities: gentle Athena, assertive Octavia, curious Callie, and informative Karma. Each creature shows her cleverness in a myriad of ways, escaping enclosures like an orangutan, jetting water to bounce balls, and endless tricking companions with multiple sleights of hand to get food. Scientists have only recently accepted the intelligence of dogs, birds, and chimpanzees, but are now watching octopuses to solve problems and are trying to decipher the meaning of the animals' color-changing techniques. With her joyful passion for these intelligent and fascinating creatures, quote from Literary Journal editor's Spring Pick, Montgomery chronicles the full appreciation of this mollusk as she tells a unique love story. By turns funny, entertaining, touching, and profound, The Soul of an Octopus reveals what octopuses can teach us about meeting of two very different minds. This book promises to tell us an interesting story and highly informative look at the life of octopuses and the author's personal encounter with them. The opening paragraph is as follows. On a rare warm day in mid-March, when the snow was melting in the mud in New Hampshire, I traveled to Boston, where everyone was strolling along the harbor or sitting on benches licking ice cream cones. But I quit the blessed sunlight for the moist, dim sanctuary of the New England Aquarium. I had a date with a giant Pacific octopus. So the author's goal is to show us in detail the lives of octopuses and to help the reader understand how unique and marvelous these creatures are. So we learn along with the writer, who details her experiences meeting a few octopuses throughout the book. She gives each octopus their own section, how she falls in love with them. Ms. Montgomery is an American naturalist who was born in Germany and is an author as well as a screenwriter. She has traveled the world learning about animals and has written 34 books for adults and children, as well as working with National Geographic scripting Spell of the Tiger and Mother Bear Man. She strongly believes that her audience can learn to be more compassionate when they better understand the animal world. She has won numerous awards and honors. So the tone of her book is very laid back and easygoing. It's very almost like a conversation. She's easy to read and very easy to like. There are humorous moments, sad moments, and very honest moments in her book. In her first chapter, she states, "I wanted to meet an octopus. I wanted to touch an alternate reality. I wanted to explore the different kind of consciousness." So she first introduces the reader to Athena and describes what it feels like to touch her. And she takes us along this journey, meeting and bonding with 4 separate octopuses, and shares her emotions and the lessons she learned. So what I liked about this book was the honesty and the love and respect for other animals that this author shares with us. She paints herself with the wonder of a child when she first meets Athena, and grows in knowledge and respect and even love for these amazing animals. And I myself have this deep love for octopuses. I collected them for many years. So for me, this book was an amazing read. There's so much information about how octopuses live, eat, breathe, communicate, how smart they are, and sometimes how their cleverness can lead to their own deaths. There wasn't anything I disliked about this book, other than I felt like I didn't ever want it to end. I just wanted her to keep meeting more and more octopuses and share that with me. I envy this writer because she got to literally plunge her arms into water and have an octopus taste her with its suckers. There are 15 photographs at the end of this book showing us the octopuses, their environments, some of the other animals that they live among, and one of the author and one of the handlers that works with the octopuses at the aquarium. They're very clear quality and enhance the book, showing the readers part of her experience as well as telling it. The author writes for a wide audience. She's hoping to help people understand the lives of these mysterious creatures, but I feel it's a bit more limited to those who are actually specifically interested in marine biology or octopuses in general, but it really should be more widely read. This book put me through a gambit of emotions. I was laughing hard enough that I actually triggered my asthma at times, and I was weeping like a child in others. I highly recommend this book to all of my listeners, and I give it a rating of 5 out of 5 stars. You can find Soul of an Octopus at Amazon, selling for $13.99 for the ebook, $8.72 for the paperback, $16.99 for the hardcover, and $7.49 at Audible. It is also available at Barnes & Noble for $13.99 for the ebook, $16.49 in paperback, $27.99 in hardcover, and free for the audiobook through the Barnes & Noble app. So that concludes my reviews for today. Please remember to like and subscribe. Next week, I will be back with more reviews or possibly an interview. I am not sure just yet how that's going to work out. So again, 10,000 Books and More is an Owl and Dragonfly production in association with A Bookish Kind of Art. Until next time, peace and be safe.